Here's the problem. All right. The referee involved, Al Guiney. He's a great guy, super nice guy. All right. And I have nothing bad to say about him. But it's exactly what you're saying, because let's take a look at the referees they had for the show here. They had Jason Herzog. They have Herb Dean. They have Mike Beltran. They have Mark Goddard. And they have Al Guiney. So which one is the one that's kind of out of place in this group? Well, it's Al. He's the guy that doesn't have a lot of big-time experience. He's done some, fights, he's done them in Bellator. He's done a couple of UFCs. But this is where athletic commissions, when you got to look, there's been Andy Foster, who is in California, used to sit there and he used to, when I was working, he would say, he goes, I just, he says, if I have a big fight, I put John McCarthy in there. He says, that way no one can say anything about me. He goes, if John McCarthy screws up, he goes, I didn't screw up. John McCarthy screwed up. He goes, there's no one better that I could put in that position. So the press can't get on me for putting someone that I should have put somebody else or something like that. And that does take, and that's what Herb does, or Mark Goddard does, or Jason Herzog, or Mike Beltran. That's what they do for the athletic commission. When you take a look and you have 4 guys sitting there that you could have in that spot, but no, I wanted to take my guy, and this is what happens is they take and they say, well, look, this, our guy has worked all the small events. We want to give them something. And I understand you want to give them something, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're wrong because it's not about your guy. It's about the fighters. And this has happened in the past. When Ronda Rousey fought Miesha Tate, go back and watch the fight, because when Ronda ends up getting a hold of Miesha's arm, Miesha tries to fight her way out of that armbar, and Ronda not only takes and, she sublugates the arm by bending it backwards. It's dislocated. You can see it, and the referee at the time lets it go. Well, when you dislocate an arm, a lot of people say, well, if the fighter wants to continue, they should be able to continue. No, they should not be able to continue, because you have things that are happening inside of that arm that can end up actually even costing the fighter their life. Because if one of the major arteries in that arm gets twisted or cut, or a bone scrapes it and it starts to have a leak, they could bleed to death. So there comes a point in fighting. This is a sporting event. Fighting is, we do this in the UFC, if it's in Bellator, in the PFL, wherever. It's sport. And there comes a point where you get checkmated. And when your arm gets dislocated, like we saw with Jamahal Hill and Paul Craig, it's over. You lost. You got checkmated. And when we have an official that is standing inside of that cage as close as anyone can be, and they don't see that dislocation, or they see it and allow the fight to continue, then we have someone that shouldn't be doing that job. Somebody else should have been doing it. And that's really what we have here is, you cannot tell me that you didn't have somebody else there that was better prepared to handle that situation. And if you had somebody that was better prepared to handle that situation and you put the other person in there, then shame on you. It's your fault. You're not doing your job in protecting the fighters. It's just the way it is. You're supposed to be there to do things for the betterment of the sport and the betterment of the fighters.
So what do you do, though, in those situations with the refs that are trying to get top talent refereeing jobs?
Okay, but all right, you've
got to give them a chance, an opportunity in these situations. I'm going
to ask you a question, because this is what people don't understand about refereeing and the difference of, you could just put anybody in any of these spots. And this is some of the athletic commissions don't get it. Is, Josh, when you first started fighting, okay, your first fights, when you walked out, how nervous were you?
I didn't know what I was getting myself into, so I'm not very nervous.
Okay.
But no, I know what you mean.
All right, so when you first fought, we'll say Hermes Franca in the UFC.
Yeah.
Kind of nervous?
Yeah, I was pretty nervous.
Yeah.
I was pretty fucking nervous.
So as you were standing there getting ready and they're announcing you, what do you think your heart rate was at about?
Oh, probably at least 120.
Okay.
Somewhere around
And that's
there.
because you're going to fight, and that's normal and that's understandable. And so when you were later on in your career and you were going to fight, so you were fighting, you know what, we'll say Gil Melendez for the third time in a trilogy, and for a world title, what was your heart rate?
Yeah, probably like, I don't know. I'd say probably like probably about 100.
Yeah.
Maybe less.
Somewhere
Maybe
between
less.
80 to 100.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And why?
The experience.
Yeah. It's the experience and understanding the situation you're going to be in and saying, I've been there, done that. I'm not worried about this. What people don't understand is when you get into these bigger fights and you get into world title fights and they look at the referee's standing there like, they're all, in command, where a lot of them, trust me, their heart rate as they're standing there looking, they're not doing anything. Their heart rate's up around 120, 130, 140.
They're shitting themselves.
Yes.
Fucking right there.
They are absolutely fucking at that edge of, man, you're starting to panic because there's pressure. Pressure, affects everybody. And so that pressure of, I don't want to make a mistake. Let me, just let this thing go for a while. And it's all this pressure that as the fight goes on, it can dwindle out and they'll become fine. But if things happen right away in that fight, they don't make good decisions because their heart rate is up and they tend to wait or not make a good decision based upon that high heart rate, because we don't make as good a decision once our heart rate gets to a certain point. And this is what happens with fighters. I would tell athletic commissions all the time. I said, look, you want to put your guy into this position. And I'm just telling you, look, I train this guy. He's a good guy. And he's not ready for this fight. I'll go and tell them that I'm the reason that he's not going to get the fight if you want. And I'm not going to get the fight. It's going to go to so-and-so. But so-and-so is ready for that fight. They've put in the time. They've been in this situation before. And your guy's heart rate's going to be at about 140, while this guy's heart rate's going to be at about 75. That's the guy that you want in there. And I can tell you the highest my heart rate would be, when I did like Conor McGregor against Eddie Alvarez in, Madison Square Garden. That was a bucket list for me as far as, Madison Square Garden. My heart rate was probably about 80. Okay. And because I was excited about being in Madison Square Garden looking around and stuff, but that's just because I'm not worried about making the mistake. I'm not worried about anything. And so I'm calm. So usually I'll make the better decision. And some of them don't get it. They don't understand that pressure, and that just because someone does one fight, doing another fight, it's completely different. And it's all self-induced pressure, but that pressure usually makes you either not make a decision or make a bad one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to more time in the cage, and that's what I was talking about. Those, I want to know, what do you do? Do you go just give them the earlier fights in the prelims?
Yes,
and then see how they performed in that. But I mean, if you're talking about a main card fight for him, the Paul Craig fight and Hill fight would have been the perfect fight to give him if you were insistent on having him on the main card.
Okay,
so you sure the fuck weren't going to give him the Damian Maia and Bilal Muhammad fight, maybe, but not Leon and Diaz, and not Moreno and Figueiredo, and definitely not Izzy and Vettori. So you're not giving him those top 4 fights, those top 3 fights.
So why are you putting him on a main card fight? Because look, let's be honest. Okay, out of all those guys that are sitting there doing the fights, 2 of them did championship fights. Those guys will make a little bit more money, but Al Guiney, Herzog, and Herb Dean all make the same, no matter how many fights they did. If Herb did 4 fights that night and Jason did 2, they get the same pay. And the same with Al. It's like, you don't get more money. So as long as you're part of, it's all about being part of. You don't have to put the person in that position where now all of a sudden they're on the pay-per-view and people are watching and the pressure starts to build. Don't put your guy in that spot. There's reasons why you're bringing in those other guys. Yep. Yeah,
but the UFC doesn't have any say, right? They can't put their own. They can't say like, "Hey, we don't want him in there," or they do, but they don't have to listen to them.
No, the UFC will normally, in that situation, like they'll say, "Okay, he's going to do the first." They would have said something if he was doing, like you say, the champion, the like Leon Edwards, the Brandon Moreno versus Figueiredo or the Israel, they would have said something. But they're okay. He's going to do that. Just the first fight. Okay. When in reality they're going, I would rather you put one of these guys.
100% agree.